Record number of women are running for Congress. A record number of women are running for the governor's mansions. Record numbers of women are donating, and record number of women are turning out. The numbers don't lie. They also tell a new story, a nuanced story, and that's what we want to dive into. What does it foreshadow? What message are women voters sending right now, especially when it comes to 2018 and beyond? So let's do it. Celinda, you literally wrote the book on women
with Kellyanne Conway.
With a certain pollster that I think, a Republican pollster I think a lot of people know. But when it comes to women voters, are you finding that women voters are focused on the same issues today than they were focused when you wrote the book in 2005?
There's a lot of similarity. And we wrote the book, What Do Women Really Want? We were hoping that a lot of men would buy the book. But now we just completed a survey for the YWCA, the most comprehensive survey of women. And what we found was that women are still very focused on kitchen table economics. They're very focused on healthcare, on education, on the cost of medical care, on being the sandwich generation. One of the new issues that's really emerged is gun violence. Women are extremely focused on gun violence in schools. And then as Speaker Pelosi, I like to call her Speaker, said, women are very, very focused on changing Washington and on ending the power of money and ending the corruption in Washington.
You also wrote a book, your book on millennial voters, which is, I guess we can say politicians of every stripe have been dogged by the ability to turn out this huge and very important voting bloc. When you look particularly, Kristen, at millennial women voters, what are you seeing from them? Are you seeing a trend, a new level of enthusiasm? Do you think they're going to turn out?
Well, I think first, if you look at the way that the millennial generation looks at the two political parties, if you go back over a decade and a half, Republican standing among millennial men has been pretty stable. It has not changed very much in the last decade and a half. Millennial men split fairly evenly between the two parties. In the last decade and a half, millennial women went from being a little bit Democratic to being a D+50 group. Wow. So almost all of the Republican Party's problem with the millennial generation can be boiled down to losing millennial women. Now, the question of will they turn out, I think, is still an open one. The good news for those who care a lot about women in politics is, for my entire lifetime, more women have voted in each election than men. Whether it's midterms, whether we're looking at turnout as a percentage of eligible voters, raw votes, women vote. But for younger voters, if you don't have that habit of having voted time and time again, if you don't feel like your vote matters, then it takes a little longer to kind of learn those lessons, become an active participant. That's why older voters turn out in such greater numbers. So the real question is, we're seeing all of this activism and enthusiasm among young women. Do they think that voting is a key component of that? Now, there's some data. Tufts University, they've got they're affiliated with a group called Circle, who for a decade and a half has been doing great polling on millennials. And they're showing record levels of interest and engagement in politics.
That's still the best measure. I mean, it's
for sure.
Forever will be enthusiasm and engagement.
But I still think it's an open question. Will that materialize at the ballot box in the way that Democrats need?
Is there a reason, just on the most basic level, if you had the answer to this, you would be paid by every politician, why they don't? Is it just by age, they just don't seem a need to vote?
I think part of it is when you ask people, do you think that people should have to know a lot about politics in order to vote? Younger voters are more likely to say yes to that question, and they're also more likely to rate their own knowledge of politics as being lower. So I think in some ways it's I don't know if my vote counts, and I don't know if I should be voting. I haven't had time to look at the issues, so maybe I'll just sit this one out. This may be an election that changes that.
I think another thing that goes on for young voters is they have lots of other ways to express their activism. I mean, for the Democrats, and particularly for the women and the millennial women who are fired up about Me Too and fired up about cultural change, the question is, do they protest? Do they go to the next Twitter storm, or do they vote? And often voting for what they perceive to be flawed politicians who are old enough to be their parents is not exactly that motivating. We did a very, very interesting study for the Barbara Lee Family Foundation and found that if we engage the Me Too issues, if, for example, one of the reforms, no taxpayer dollars used to pay for settlements, ending the gag rule on women who have experienced this, then millennial women start to connect their voting to the issues that matter to them.
When it comes to Democratic women, Celinda, is this, in the new enthusiasm that you're seeing, is it all about Donald Trump?
No, it's not all about Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is a very big factor in it. But there's a huge difference among women between college-educated women and non-college-educated women. College-educated women are now so fired up. They are ready to vote in record numbers, voting Democratic. And as you sort out, when John King sorted out those congressional districts, you can really sort them out by upscale suburban districts and downscale suburban districts. So college-educated women now are actually moving their party identification Democratic. That's how angry they are. Downscale women feel more mixed, and both parties have to deliver on an economy that's going to help their families. That's going to be the ultimate criteria. And Democrats are still behind on the economy. We might be able to win in 2018 with that formula. We're not going to win in 2020 with that formula.
And the new polling out even today showing that that's where voters are giving a lot of credit to Republicans, giving a lot of credit to the president still on the economy. Despite what the president has said over and over again, he did not win among all women in 2016.
Yeah.
But he does say it all the time, though. That's why I had to point it out.
He says a lot of things all the time.
I digress.
Including two women.
But he did win among white women. When it comes to
But white women have always voted Republican.
When it comes to women Trump voters, we'll call them, where have you seen a change? Do you see, since he's taken office, since he won the election?
You know, I think a lot of women who voted for Donald Trump but maybe had a lower opinion of him on certain character attributes and things sort of knew what they were getting when they voted for him, and therefore he has been exactly who he said he would be in office. And so if you looked at the exit polls, about 4 in 10 women voted for Donald Trump in 2016. In the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, his job approval among women was 38%. So, you know, hovering right around, he's not winning women, but he's still holding on to about 4 in 10 of them, which, given the way the gender gap works, you know, it cuts both ways. In that same poll, I mean, we now have a gender gap on the generic ballot that's approaching 40 points, where women on that last poll were plus 25D.
Yeah.
But men were plus 14R, and that's been big movement in just the last month. So the gender gap is cutting both ways. You know, Republicans may not need to win women like they did in the 2010 midterms to still kind of hold serve in this midterm.
Does that worry you?
Well, one of the keys is married women. And so there are 2 policies that Democrats would benefit enormously from. A national policy for divorce, but we haven't proposed that yet. But we do a lot better with unmarried women. And then one of our most important things is to keep married women from voting the same way as their husbands. One of the things that hasn't been reported on very much is that Hillary Clinton won married women in 2016. Barack Obama had lost them in 2008 and 2012. So we've got to make sure that we provide married women with their own source of information, CNN-type information rather than Fox News information.
Why, on the most basic level, Kristen, why do Democrats, as you were saying, it's D plus 25 when it comes to women overall right now, why do Democrats have a lock on women?
I think that right now, part of why Democrats have a lock on women is it didn't just begin with Donald Trump. I mean, the gender gap has existed going back for quite some time.
1980.
Yeah, it's not new. But I do think that right now, what we're seeing is a lot of polarization in the electorate, not just along gender lines, along generational lines, racial lines, where folks sort of feel like one party or the other has their interests more at heart. And so while Republicans are doing quite well on the economy, and I agree that I think women vote on these sort of pocketbook issues, I do think that our politics are increasingly becoming defined around identity and which tribe do I feel more comfortable being a part of. And something that I think worries me a lot is that we do have a number of Republican female leaders who I think are very impressive, folks like Ambassador Nikki Haley, but I don't think we have enough of them yet. And I think that we need to have more sort of Republican female role models to show more women that there is a place in our party if they like limited government, et cetera.
I think that one of the biggest mistakes the Republicans, after this election, if we do win, I think the Republican assessment is going to, and they should be listening more to people like Kristen, the assessment is going to be they made a huge mistake not nominating more women. Only 29% of women won in their primaries. 71% of women won in our primaries. We nominate, for structural reasons, and intent, we nominate a lot more women, and that's a huge mistake on the Republican side.
Celinda, if you look at statewide races, like when you're talking about governor's races, that is where, at least right now, we've seen women of color play an especially big role. Do you see them turning out? In a way
it depends. Women of color are not monolithic, and we have done several studies now, including the YWCA study, where we looked at Asian American, Pacific Islander women, Latinas, African American women, Native American women. So it's not monolithic, but African American women are turning out in record numbers. I mean, frankly, the Democrats should just turn over America to African American women. We would be much better off. Latinas are lagging behind, and I think one of the most frustrating things for Democrats is the lagging Latino vote. We need to invest more in infrastructure, and we need to protect the vote. Clearly, there's a lot of voter intimidation. Asian American women often don't get the attention they deserve, and Native American women can make a big difference in races like Tester's race, Heidkamp's race, et cetera. So it's not monolithic, but right now women of color are turning out.
I want to move on to women candidates as well, but really quick, just drilling down on one major issue that's become such an issue, Brett Kavanaugh. Did that change the game, do you think, in terms of what is going to happen in 2018 and beyond? Let's talk about 2018 when it comes to women voters. I'm curious.
I don't think it changed the game. I mean, Kavanaugh reinforced, we were talking about this earlier, Kavanaugh reinforced the women who were already fired up and ready to go. What Kavanaugh did is it energized Republicans, but Donald Trump would have found one way or the other to do that. And it also did polarize men, which has been the thing that's been less reported on. So we're going to have a gender gap that's on steroids. And we're going to have, I think, politics be something that a lot of families agree not to talk about at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner.
If they didn't already. On women candidates, as we said, just record numbers across the board. 239 women are running for the House. Currently, there are 84 women serving in the chamber. 23 women are running for the Senate. 23 are currently serving. 16 women are running for the governor's mansions. There are only 6 women governors serving right now, and I don't think I need to remind everyone, women make up more than half the U.S. population. So just to point it out. What is it about this year, Celinda?
Well, I think that Trump was very mobilizing, and in a funny kind of way, women, and we've done these studies together, women always say, well, I'm not ready. You know, men say, president, I see a president in the mirror. Women say, oh, I need more training, I don't know enough. Well, I think when Donald Trump got elected, a lot of Democratic women thought, if he can do it, I can do it.
I don't care what I see in the mirror.
Yeah, really. A lot of women were motivated by local issues. Who had never thought. I mean, we have record numbers of women doctors and teachers running. A lot of women were mobilized by the march. A lot of women have been mobilized by the issues and the style of this administration. So it was very, very much a cumulative effect. And what I think we have to make sure is that what good news is we're filling the pipeline with more women. But we have to make sure that this isn't just an overnight sensation, that we keep this going.
And something that I think Democrats have done very well is they have infrastructure that specifically reaches out to women and says, you should run, and here's how you can win, and here's how we'll help you.
Why don't Republicans have that?
And I think, Republicans have efforts, for instance, Representative Elise Stefanik is the NRCC's recruitment chair. Like, there are things in place that have been good steps, but it's not at the comprehensive level that Democrats have. And, there's a lot of research that says you have to ask women, you have to have like a really special ask when you ask a woman to run for office because of what you mentioned. They don't just want to jump in without some reasonable chance of success. I think it's really important for Republicans to begin having that infrastructure so that women do feel like on the right, they can jump in and have a chance of success. And that means specifically targeting women to run in primaries where they have a real shot at winning in the general. Right now on the Republican side, far fewer women running than on the Democratic side. But even there, a lot of them are running in districts that are deep blue districts. And so there is a real chance that we're going to get to Election Day and there's going to be more women than ever in Congress, and there will be fewer Republican women in the House. And that breaks my heart.
Do you think women candidates have an advantage with women voters?
Oh, they definitely have an advantage with women voters, but party is still the strongest determinant of the vote.
More so than gender.
Yeah, and ironically, and this is why Kristen's totally right, is that Democratic women are the ones who defect the most. So if you wanted to get Democratic women voters, you would be nominating women. Because then we have to pull them back and say, wait, that's the wrong kind of woman. You don't want to vote for that woman. So, as they tear off down the hall to vote for the woman. So, I mean, one of the differences is 59% of Democratic primaries are female. Only 45% of Republican primaries are female. Women of color, whom you mentioned earlier, are a major force in our primaries, and they nominate women. Born-again evangelical Christians are a major force in Republican primaries. They tend to be more reticent. So there's some structural features here as well.
It's also fascinating because it's not just how many women are running, it's how they're running that seems to be so different. I mean, they're highlighting their gender rather than hiding it. Candidates breastfeeding in ads, candidates putting on makeup in ads, talking about assault and abuse in their campaign. What does that mean, do you think?
I think for this election, because you have so many women who are so fired up, I think there's a sort of a thought on the part of a lot of candidates that, look, I'm going to put this at the foreground because this is going to help fire up and help me identify with some of those voters who they'll vote for me if they're persuaded to think it matters to vote. But I would say this is a bit of a double-edged sword. So there's a lot of research that suggests that there's no party difference on the question of are women and men just as equally capable of serving in office and those sorts of things. But where you start to wind up seeing big party differences is on things like, are women better at coming up with compromise? Are women better at getting things done? Democrats are more likely to say, yeah, women are better than guys at those things. And Republicans don't like going there. They say, no, it depends on the person. I don't think gender defines that. And so I think for Republicans, we sort of either don't foreground gender, or when we do, it's in a different way because of those sort of underlying reticence to say, well, women are better than men.
I think the other thing is voters voted for change. If they voted for change, that's how Donald Trump won. I mean, the thing that's so depressing for our side, the Democrats out there at cocktail parties, Donald Trump won on character, which when you say that, most Democrats have to go and get another drink. But the character trait was change. It beat honesty. It beat being qualified. It sure as heck beat being qualified. It beat every other character trait. People are voting for change again. And frankly, in 2020, people will vote for change.
Well, and on that point, this was the number in that NBC poll that came out yesterday that blew my mind the most, is that if you ask voters, who's winning on the economy, Donald Trump's ahead by record numbers. If you ask who's ahead on healthcare, Democrats are killing on that issue. The third issue up is who is best to bring about change in Washington, and Republicans had a 1-point advantage on that. In an election that is a midterm, where it should be the party that's out of power is the change party.
Right,
that Republicans are ahead on that by 1, I think is why you have so many sort of strange conflicting signals about what is going to happen.
And that's why you had Speaker Pelosi say we're going to lead with campaign finance reform, which, by the way, is also something that I think will help women. Because another thing about women is they don't want to spend their time raising money, and they think they don't have the networks for money that men do. And campaign finance reform is a great way to increase the number of women who will run in both parties.
Well, they're also changing the game as well. I interviewed a Democratic nominee for Congress, Luba Gretchen Shirley, and she forced the FEC to allow campaign funds to be used to pay for her for babysitting.
Right.
And this gets to, because we're also seeing younger women candidates running, women in their 20s and 30s, maybe in more need of a babysitter.
Well, and this is something, so Pew Research Center asked voters, why do you think more women don't run for office?
Yeah.
And they broke the results out by party. And Democrats, much more so than Republicans, will point to things like sexism, women can't raise as much money, et cetera. Republicans are less likely to identify some of those structural things, but the one thing both parties can agree on is that the struggle of kind of raising a young family and running for office is what deters far too many young women from running. And I think if you look at the conservative side of our society, where you're going to kind of over-index for more traditional family structures, I think that just creates an even bigger challenge to getting more Republican women to run.
Will it matter, so Linda, will it matter how many women ran or even how many women won in primaries if there isn't a landslide of women winning in 2 weeks?
It'll matter because, and this is, I think, one of the most important things, because women will think, oh my gosh, I lost, I was totally rejected. Men run again. And I think that what women have to realize...
This was a stepping stone to something bigger.
Right, or the same thing.
Yeah.
What women need to understand is this isn't a loss, this is a launch. And that's the way you should think about it.
Amy Chosik of the New York Times, she wrote a very timely and very thought-provoking piece this weekend for the Times about the Year of the Woman, and I think it was titled Down with the Year of the Woman, and I'll read you one paragraph. Are female candidates still unicorns, magical woodland creatures that rear their sparkling horns every couple of decades and only when provoked, as they were after Anita Hill's testimony in '91 and Christine Blasey Ford's agonizing account of sexual assault last month? The last Year of the Woman was the '92 election. How will we know when we're beyond a Year of the Woman, a pink wave, as I would love if we could wholeheartedly reject that moniker, when women are running and voting, winning and serving, it becomes the norm and not the exception? What's the signal you're looking for?
We have half of our candidates in both parties being women, and half of our elected officials women, which would just be representative. It wouldn't be a revolution, by the way. It would just be representative. And I think we have to look at some structural changes to campaign finance reform, ranked choice voting, proportional voting, all of these things we know, quotas within the parties, all of these things help with the number of women running.
Where are you looking to see, what are you looking for come election night and come the exit polls to see where the real impact was from the women voting, women candidates, more with the women vote this cycle?
So remember the map that John King just had up here about an hour ago or so, where it had this red United States of America with a couple blue sapphires in it of the sort of urban areas where Democrats do quite well.
We are the jewels. I like that.
So nice.
Doesn't always feel that way.
What's right around that? The suburbs. I mean, that I think is where, look at a race like Barbara Comstock's running for re-election in the DC suburbs. That was a race that John mentioned. I mean, that kind of a race where you have an awful lot of, not just women, but college-educated women. Right now, college-educated women, their disapproval of Donald Trump is at 70%. That's extraordinarily high. And so again, women are not a monolith, but I think it's places where you're going to see more women who have college degrees is the kind of place where if they're extra fired up and if they were lower propensity voters but are now turning out in sort of presidential year numbers, that's where you're going to see it pop up.
Just finally, as the pollsters, what is your prediction? What's going to happen? Do you think do D's take the House and R's keep the Senate? Where are you guys right now?
I think D's take the House. I think the question is the margin, and it will be women who will have delivered it, women voters and women candidates. In the Senate, I think it's tough, but senators are very individualized races, and 2 weeks is a long time, and there's a lot of money at stake. And then I think, but again, if Democrats win, it will be because of women. And then let's not forget, and you mentioned it, and
Yes.
it's really important, the women governors.
Yes.
The toughest thing for women to get elected to, according to the Barbara Lee Foundation work, is executive office.
It's the difference between the representative and being an executive.
Yeah, and people still don't put women in positions of solo power. So if we break through with a record number of women governors, and frankly, the Republicans have been better at this. If we break through with a record number of women governors, that's going to be a big breakthrough for the future.
I still think 2 weeks is an awful long time. So ask me for a prediction on the morning of the election day, and maybe I'll feel confident enough.
Okay, I'm calling you for sure.
A total and artful dodge. We will end on with Kristen Solzhenitsyn. Thanks, guys, so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.